We want to bring in Ted Jenkin right now, financial expert and president of Exit Wealth Advisors. Good morning to you. I want to start with
Morning.
inflation. We see that inflation rose 2.8%. That's the number on an annual basis, slightly lower than most economists were forecasting, but continuing to signal that price increases are still elevated despite the Federal Reserve's efforts to kind of try and tame inflation with a 2% annual rate. So what does this say to you about the current state of our economy?
Yeah, well, good morning, Fanchin. And look, this normally would be a pretty good number at 2.8% because people would see prices going down. Of course, as you mentioned, this is elevated on some 20% cumulative inflation over the last 4 years. I think the Fed has a very slippery tightrope to walk on right now. They're trying to get inflation to 2%. They want to make sure unemployment doesn't spike much higher than 4% and keep interest rates at a modest rate. What we don't know right now, Fanchin, is how all of these tariffs will impact short-term inflation, and time will tell over the next 30 to 90 days.
Let's talk a little bit, since you mentioned the tariffs, let's talk a little bit about these retaliatory tariffs we're just now finding out coming out of Canada. Of course, we know the European Union already imposed a $28 million tariff or billion-dollar tariff on our goods. What does this look like to you in terms of the uncertainty and the economy? Of course, President Trump has said that he is really trying to get America to shift its view of spending, 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 and kind of transition to a more private investment plan for the long term. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, people are seeing this fold out in front of them in the stock market and in their 401ks, some of them down 10 to 15%. But I think for a long time, President Trump has said, we're not being treated equally on the global stage when it comes to global trade. And I don't know what he'll announce on April 2nd yet. But certainly when you look at the reciprocal tariffs, Europe put some in today. He's basically said, look, when we export you a car and you charge us a 10% tariff and we import at a 2.5% tariff, it's just not fair. And it's tough seeing this play out on the world stage. I think his goal is to bring more jobs to America and get prices to go down on products here in America, not up. But it is short-term pain for sure.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it all playing out on the world stage. That is causing a lot of uncertainty in many sectors of our economy. The White House saying, though, we are not on the doorstep of a recession, but there is a lot of turmoil right now. What do you think will be the sign when the administration sees that they've gone too far, if they go too far, or of course, if they have to course correct?
Well, let's remind people that a recession is when we have two negative consecutive quarters of GDP. And we, in fact, had that a couple of years ago, and the White House did not call that a recession. Fanchin, I look at the 555 numbers. If inflation is more than 5%, unemployment is more than 5%, and interest rates are more than 5%, we have a real problem. If 2 out of 3 of those categories go north of 5%, we have a real problem. For the time being, we still have $21 trillion in what's called to be the M2 money supply of people having money in the bank, cash, CDs right now. So I'm not as worried about that short term, but something we have to keep an eye on.
Absolutely, and we will continue to do that right here at Dr. Phil's Merit TV, and we, of course, will have you back very soon, Ted. Thanks to you. Good to see you.
All right.